Chaparral. We're glad you're here. It's been a crazy week. Just in general, wouldn't you say? I mean, we've had hurricanes and some major flooding. The West Coast actually had a huge storm, very surprising, kind of come through there. Even like last night and tonight, if you get a chance, the Hunter's moon is up. I don't know if you've seen that big, huge orange fireball of the moon. Really cool thing to see at sunset, so check that out tonight. And also the Cubs. Yeah, man, they're still in the playoffs, right? That's a good thing. Yeah, okay, there we go. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, I actually predicted some of this. We were talking about the end of the world, and I said when I was a kid, and this is true, I always thought that I knew when Jesus would come back. Because I grew up with the Cubs. I mean, since I was little, my grandfather used to score the games, and he'd show me how to do that. And so I grew up with the Cubs, and I thought, my luck will be is that at the end of the world, the Cubs will be in the World Series, Game 7, ninth inning, tied, 3-2 pitch. Guy hits the ball over the fence. It's heading out of Wrigley Field for the Cubs win. And right then, before the ball crosses, boom, Jesus comes back. I just kind of thought that would happen, right? Well, if you think about it, did you see the game last night? Right, they're playing the enemies of God. The evilest team on the planet, the Dodgers. Right? They're playing the Dodgers, and it's 3-3 in the bottom of the 8th inning, and this man, comes out of the desert. Miguel Montero, right? A former D-back, like a prophet from the desert. He comes out, bases loaded, cracks a grand slam, and the Cubs win. Very prophetic. So I'm thinking, maybe this could be the last year I say maybe next year, right? I thought, so I don't want to say the words, but holy cow, this is looking pretty good. And I thought, I got to get in my last jokes about the Cubs being terrible because man, I'll tell them next year, right? So for example, look at this one. There's a Cubs fan watching the last World Series with the Flintstones. Here, how about this one from Lion King? It says, "Hey Dad, what is a World Series? I wouldn't expect you to know what that is, Simba. You're just a cub." You get it? Okay. Or how about this one? What is the difference between the Chicago Cubs and dirt? Nothing. They both get swept. Yeah. What does a Chicago Cub fan do when his team has won the World Series? Turn off the Xbox. And last one, did you hear that the Chicago Cubs don't have a website? Because they can't put 3 W's together. That's pretty bad. Okay, we have all these end time scenarios, right? And everything from the Chicago Cubs win the World Series to the Mayan calendar in 2012. Remember that whole Mayan calendar thing in 2012? Comets flying by, hidden codes. A lot of people do the whole number code thing. Even Homer Simpson tried that. Check this out.
Homie, you didn't touch your second dinner tonight. And you're reading books. Word books. What's going on?
Marge, the rapture is nigh. These books will help me figure out how nigh. This whole deal is scientifically proven. The book of Revelations has 404 verses. Add the number of people at the Last Supper, minus the number of Filipinos in the Bible, and you get
3,100,000.
3:15 p.m., May 18th. That's when the rapture will begin.
May 18th? That's 1 week from today.
A week? That's 7 days from now.
All right, so you've heard this kind of stuff before, right? We're looking for the numbers and all that stuff. And a lot of times when we talk about endgame, we get these controversies and this fear and this uncertainty. What's interesting is that actually very little of the Bible talks about that. This literature that we call apocalyptic is really kind of confined to the last few chapters of Daniel, Revelation, and some bits and pieces of the Gospels and some of Ezekiel. So it's really not that much. And so I want to talk about Revelation for a couple weeks now. And I know a lot of people hear that word Revelation and they get excited, or they get nervous, or they think they're going to get some special information about some code for the end of the world like Homer Simpson. Or maybe they think, oh my goodness gracious, it doesn't apply to me, I don't care. That kind of thing. Well, here's the thing about this book. There's no book in the Bible that is more contested, with more controversy or confusion or complex interpretations than the book Revelation. And in fact, it probably raises more questions than it answers. Now, a lot of times, and I've seen this quite a bit, you will see sermon series on Revelation. Like a series of Revelation. But what it ends up being is just the first 3 chapters. They'll cover the 7 churches that are mentioned in the first 3 chapters of Revelation and kind of stop there. Because Jesus is talking very specifically to these churches and giving them kind of instructions on how to live. And that's pretty simple stuff, which is good stuff, but just kind of simple. But they ignore the rest of the entire book because it's difficult and it's confusing. But the reason it's difficult and the reason it's confusing is because we don't really understand the cultural context or the type of literature that it is. I've been teaching Revelation on Thursday nights for about the last couple months. And a lot of that time has been spent doing background stuff, understanding what's going on in the culture, what's happening in the Bible, what images they're referring to. Because Revelation and Daniel is really a type of literature that we call apocalyptic literature. It's a type of writing. And like I said, we see it in certain places. But like other types of writing, it has its own way of reading it. And if you read a certain type of literature a certain way, you get it. If you don't, you kind of miss the point. And it applies to all kinds of literature. So like poetry is a type of literature. There's a way to read poetry. Or storytelling. There's a way to tell a story. Or business letters. There's a way to write those, right? They have their own type of literary stuff that tells you how to read it and how to write it. And if you mess that up, you mess up the message. So let's say, for example, I'm writing Stacy, my wife who's right there, who had a birthday this week. I'm writing her a birthday card. I want to write her a nice, romantic birthday note. But if I do that on letterhead and write at the top, to whom it may concern, comma, and at the end write respectfully, comma, Frank A. Chervinsky, that won't go well for me as a romantic letter because it doesn't fit the type of letter it's supposed to be. Likewise, if I'm sending out my resume or a business proposal and I want to include like a cover letter on that proposal, and I do that in like a Hello Kitty card, and I handwrite it, and at the end put hugs and kisses, comma, Frank, that's going to be a weird interview. Right? That's not going to go well because I didn't follow the rules of that kind of literature. Does that make sense? Okay, so this literature that we call apocalyptic has its own kind of rules. And again, it's not meant to be confusing. It's just a different type of literature and a different way of writing. It doesn't necessarily fit with what we're used to today. So the people who wrote this and who read this, they didn't find it confusing. They didn't find it hard. They knew what it meant, and they thought it was important enough to pass along. And not just for some future generation. They didn't think like, well, we'll just hold on to this because someday, somewhere, somebody might figure it out. They didn't do that. Why would you do that? It meant something to them in their world that was so important and so meaningful that they thought, let's pass that along to our kids and our grandkids and their kids. Because it was meaningful and important. It spoke to their end game, and they thought it would speak to ours. Remember that our principle in talking about the end game is this. Our end is the big end for each of us, right? So when you die, when you are facing your death, that is the end for you. It's your big end. And therefore, everything that is written about the big end should apply to your end, because it is our end. So if you are here thinking that maybe this book doesn't apply to you or doesn't matter, just ask the question, why is it here? Why is it here? Why did they keep it? What did they hope that they could learn from it and pass it along to someone else? And so as we dig into this book over the next few weeks, I have a couple kind of like ground rules I want to set. And the first one is this. We're going to approach this book as explorers, not experts. I don't want you to have any pressure of like, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to miss something. I'm going to make a mistake. Don't worry. No, we're not experts. We're looking through thousands of years of history, and we're going to have some fun with it. Like Indiana Jones fun. Like, you ever go exploring for something? Maybe as a kid in the woods or something, you're out looking for whatever you find. And it's exciting. We want to have that kind of attitude when it comes to Revelation. We want to be excited and explorers. When I was at Emory University doing some graduate work, I took classes, multiple classes on this type of literature because I found it exciting to learn and see new things I hadn't thought of or seen before. I want you to have that same kind of exciting attitude when it comes to this book. The second thing is, we're going to look at this as a journey for today and not a roadmap for the future. We're not looking for some secret code book like National Treasure or trying to interpret current events or tabloid news like you see in the supermarkets, the big tabloid, world's going to end. None of that kind of stuff. How does it apply to today? We're not trying to identify the number of the beast or anything like that. Just how does it apply to today? And how does that then apply to us, others after us? And the third thing is this. We want to find out what we're going to be passing along. And what I mean by that is this. We're not going to ignore the fact that this book's in the Bible. I think a lot of folks do that. They're like, well, that's too confusing, and just kind of like tear it out and not even pay attention to it. But if you think about it, we're in a train of generations that have been given this book. And we don't want to be the ones who drop the ball, right? If those before us took it, wrote it down, it meant something, passed it on and passed it on, we don't want to be the ones who are like, yeah, we're just done. We don't want to mess with it. That's not our role. Our role is to learn from it and then pass it along to those after us. So that's our roadmap for the next few weeks. To be explorers and not experts, to look at the journey today, not the roadmap for the future, and then to be the ones who can learn from it and pass it along to those after us. So today, as we get started, I want to just look at some signposts or some perspectives that this book kind of pass along at the top level of what they're talking about. And the first one is this. You got to know that this book is written in a time of extreme persecution in the church. Okay, the Christians are being killed, tortured, persecuted. And that's the world that this book finds itself in. There was a Roman emperor named Nero who, when there's a big, huge fire in Rome in 64, big, huge fire, he blames it on the Christians and has them killed for it. So that's the kind of what you're talking about. In fact, there's a letter written in 111, so the year 112, I'm sorry, we'll use the word 112, year 112. The Emperor Trajan at the time had heard about this new group called Christians. They weren't following the Roman gods, and like who are these people? Are they Jewish? Are they not? What do they believe? And we got to figure out who these people are. They're growing like crazy, and what's going on? And so he sends a governor named Pliny to go find out and investigate who are these Christians. And then Pliny sends a letter back to the Roman Emperor, Trajan. And this is his letter, or at least parts of it. And I want to share this with you because it gives you a snapshot into our ancestors. These are people who were Christ followers in their earliest days. And we get to see an outside look at who they were and what they did. All right? So here's this, again, parts of this letter from Pliny to Trajan. He said, I've handled those who have been denounced to be Christians as follows. I asked them whether they were Christians. Those who responded affirmatively, I have asked a second and a third time under threat of death. If they persisted in their confession, I had them executed. For whatever it is they actually are, it seemed to me that they were being obstinate and stubborn. So I punished them anyway. They verified, however, in another section of the letter, he says, that their entire guilt or error consisted in the fact that on one specific day before sunrise, they were accustomed to gather together and sing hymns to Christ as their God, and to pledge themselves by an oath not to engage in any crime, but to abstain from all thievery, assault, and adultery, not to break their word once they'd given it, and not to refuse to pay their legal debts. Then they went their separate ways and came together later to eat a common meal we call the Lord's Supper today. But this was ordinary, harmless food. I considered it all the more necessary then to obtain by torture a confession of the truth from 2 female slaves whom they called deaconesses, I found nothing more than a vulgar, excessive superstition. So why were they being killed and tortured? Well, let's see. They ate together, they sang songs together, kept their word, pledged not to be thieves, didn't lie. It's all terrible, terrible things, right? What horrible people these must have been. But despite their goodness and their being good citizens and pledging to be good citizens, they were still killed. And so you got to wonder what questions they're asking. Like, where is God in all of this? Were we wrong about Jesus? How do we face tomorrow? What do I do for my kids if I get killed for being a Christ follower? What do I do then? How do I hang on till the end? Or should I just give in? We're talking about extreme persecution here. Now here's the thing. As we apply that to our lives today, we may not be under this kind of persecution that is being described here by Pliny, but we are suffering, many of us in this room. It may not be external, it might be internal, it might be illness, depression. Maybe you feel the world's crashing in on you. You just feel like, man, you just can't go another day. You just feel this pressure, and you want to give up, and you want to give in. Look, that persecution is real. Don't minimize what you're going through because it's not like what they went through. They're passing along this to you so that you be encouraged in what you're going through. Don't minimize what you're going through, but listen to these words from Revelation of hope and encouragement because they're for you. The second thing I want to point out in this book is that this is not a theological or mythological or futuristic thing. These people were looking for hope in their time. Okay, they weren't holding this off for someone else sometime later to use. It was meant for them, and if it's meant for them, it's meant for you. Let me give an example of what I'm talking about that is often kind of confusing and misused, probably one of the biggest misused parts of the book of Revelation. Revelation 13:18. It says, "This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is 666. Who's heard this before? The number of the beast, 666. I didn't say this first hour, but this is true. When I used to have a briefcase, remember you used to carry briefcases back in the day? It had a combination on it. It was 666. Because I thought no one would guess a minister's combination would be 666 for their briefcase. But here's the thing. It's a number, right? And it says here's the number of a person. We've had all these scary things about this number. Back in the 80s, I remember that they thought it was Reagan because his name had 6 letters. And each of it is Ronald, 6 letters, Wilson, Reagan. He's the beast, that kind of thing. And in fact, just by the way, it actually affected Reagan himself. When him and Nancy moved to Bel Air, they moved to 666 St. Cloud Avenue, but had the address changed to 668, just in case, right? I mean, it's that kind of thing, right? Or maybe you've heard the barcode thing. Anybody remember this? Nobody? Really? There's a thing, Stacy, yeah, we're older. I'm kidding. But there's a thing probably like maybe 10, 20 years ago where it's like the barcodes had 666 in them. So whenever you went to the grocery store and you bought, your corn dogs or your Apple Jacks, you'd boop, mark of the beast. You're going to hell, boop, I'm Apple Jacks, that kind of stuff, right? Because the number was on the barcode. Well, here's the thing. It says in the Bible, they knew who this was. And in fact, it's the guy we mentioned earlier, that guy Nero Caesar. That's who it was. There's this practice in the ancient world called gemartia, which is where we get geometry from. And what you would do is you could take letters and assign numbers to them. And that's actually how they counted in Hebrew. So Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And so when you applied numbers to letters of a name, you get a number for a name when you added them up. So Neron Caesar, his Greek name, for numbers with those letters, you got the number 666. We have found since a letter in a valley in Israel that was ancient that had this name and number associated with it, that this was who they were talking about. What's also interesting, this is kind of a cool little thing, if you look at your Bibles or your tablet, you'll see in this verse a footnote that says, other manuscripts say 616. Well, is that number bad too? No. What it was, his name, 666, Neron Caesar, when they translated it to Latin, from Greek to Latin, they made that translation, his name went from Neron Caesar to Nero Caesar. It lost the N. And since they knew who it was, they changed the number to reflect the Latin name. Does that make sense? So you can tell by the change that they knew who this was. My point is this book applied to events happening to real people at real places in real time. And so we want to look at the book like that. What did they fear really from Nero? And how did they deal with it? Because how they deal with their problems, we can talk about. We have different problems. We have different things going on, different persecutions, different suffering, different problems. But how do we deal with them the way they did? How do we have hope for today based on the hope that they had for today? Third thing is this. They believed that God was still in control and always had been. So I'll give you another example. So back in the Old Testament, years before this, there was a battle. And these armies were coming down into Israel from the north. Big, huge, scary armies. At that time, at the exact time when these armies were coming in, the king of Israel died. So folks are just scared because now here's this army. We've got no king, no leader. What are we going to do? At that moment, a prophet named Isaiah has a very, very familiar vision. In Isaiah 6, it says, "In the year that King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and exalted, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim were standing above him, 6 wings to each. With 2 he covered his faces, with 2 he covered his feet, with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Lord of hosts. The fullness of all the earth is his glory." Now, he has a vision of what? God sitting on his throne. When? When the king died. So the king dies on earth, but God's throne is still full. God is still in control. God is still taking care of things. Doesn't matter what happened with the king. God is still on his throne. And that's the point. Now look down at Revelation chapter 4. It says, "And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and inside. Day and night without ceasing they sing, Holy, 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 the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Sound familiar? Yeah, he is taking that exact image, that idea, that concept from Isaiah when God was on his throne in troubled times, when it was fearful and uncertain, brings that and says it's just like that today. And he adds a little phrase, a God who was with them then, who is with us now, and who is coming back again. And that becomes the theme of the book Revelation, who was and is to come. See, the point of Revelation is not to figure out what the future holds, but it's about who holds the future. And that's their message. Don't forget what God did back then. He's doing it now. He's going to do it in the future. And so the book talks about multiple times of persecution, multiple times of struggle, and how God is faithful in all of them, despite our brokenness in the moment. And the last message for you today from Revelation is this. They knew they had to hang on until the end. They knew they couldn't give in, and they shouldn't give in. In the middle, the dead center of this book is this beautiful image. Revelation 7. "After this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands. They cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation belongs to our God, who is seated on the throne, and to the Lamb." And all the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and all the four living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne of God and worshiped, singing, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen." Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, "Who are these robed in white? Where have they come from?" What's interesting here is that you get this beautiful image of like, it's over, like God's won, and here's all these people, and they're worshiping, and it's powerful, and all that. And then this elder stops and says, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Who are they?" Like, forget all this other stuff. Like, who are they? That's a pretty big question, right? I mean, think about it. Where do we want to be? In that crowd. We want to be part of that crowd. And so the question is, who are they, and how did they get here? And so the visionary, this person says, "Sir, you're the one who knows. Like, I don't know how they got here, you do." So the elder then says to him, "These are they who have come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." So how did they get here? How do we get in that crowd? Well, first off, it's because of Jesus, right? He pays the price of justice. He pays the debt. He has broken for our sins. That's how they get here. But it also says they are the ones who have come out of the great ordeal. They have made it through. They have hung on. They didn't give in. And that's a major theme of the book of Revelation. That despite the suffering, despite what Nero's doing, what's going on in your life, whatever that is, the message here is, hang on. Be encouraged. Be courageous. God has not forgotten you. Because the great ordeal he talks about is your ordeal, what you're going through. And the message is, despite the pressure, despite the brokenness, don't ever give in. Because in the end, you're going to win. And you're going to win because God wins. Because God's on his throne. And God is taking care of us today, as he did in the past, as he will in the future. And here's how that story ends. Verse 15. "For this reason, because they made it through the great ordeal, they are before the throne of God and worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of water of life. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." Your suffering, your difficulty, our struggles are not meaningless. They arrive at this point through brokenness. Those tears are real. You know those tears. You've probably cried those tears. You've felt those tears on your cheek. And here, God wipes them away. That brokenness, that struggle is not meaningless. Because Jesus was broken to make us whole. He was broken to take away and wipe away those tears. There's an archaeological dig in China, outside Xi'an. The Emperor Qin buried 6,000 life-sized warriors of clay in the ground, so that when he went into the everlasting life he thought he was going to be in, he'd have an army. So he buried these clay soldiers. Annie Dillard, one of my favorite authors, writes about this archaeological dig. And what she finds is that she wasn't impressed by these 6,000 clay soldiers, at least not the ones that were still intact. She writes this: "The sight of a cleaned clay soldier upright in a museum is unremarkable. And this is all that future generations will see. No one will see the display of those men crushed beyond repair. No one will display the loose parts. No one will display them crawling from the walls. Future generations will miss the crucial sight of ourselves as rammed earth." What she's saying is this, is that the struggle is the point. It's not the end. It's the middle. It's these broken pieces struggling to get out of the earth that she finds so meaningful. Revelation speaks to that yes, we are living with struggles. We are living with persecution. We are living with difficult times. There are tears from time to time on our cheeks. And Jesus came and was broken on the cross to make us whole, to take those loose and broken pieces and set us free, and to take those tears, those meaningful, real tears, and wipe them away for good. Let's pray together.